Hey everybody, it's Professor Parish, and this is week 6 for English 109. I'm going to go over a couple things this week. We are starting a new type of paper this week, but first I want to let everybody know that the compare and contrast essays, I'm going to be grading them this week, and you should be getting feedback from me. As I said in the discussion forum from week 5, you will get a chance to revise your cause and effect papers. So if you turned your papers in on Sunday and you felt like they weren't complete, or if there were some grammar errors or spelling errors, don't worry. You will get a chance to revise those papers. In your assignments, I'll show you where those revisions will be posted when they're due, but you will get a chance to make up your grade on that cause and effect paper. And the same thing will happen for our other papers in the class, and as we get to each of our papers, I'll talk about that when they're due. So I just want to give you guys a heads up. You can revise your cause and effect paper. I'm going to be grading them throughout week 6 to get them back to you in a timely fashion. So, but with that said, let's go here and let's talk about week 6. So we are getting closer and closer to midterm, which is good. I'm going to scroll down here on the assignments page to week 6. The only assignment as far as reading goes is chapter 11 in our English skills textbook. It's only 20 pages. It's pages 226 to 246, which is great. And then we are going to talk a little bit about compare and contrast in this video. And then you do have 3 assignments due this week. So the one assignment due Friday is your post for the discussion forum. And I'm going to show you all it here in a second. And then grammar review number 4 and textbook activity number 3. Not forgot about our textbook activities. We are going to get back into those. So let's start out first by talking about the discussion forum. So the discussion forum this week is talking about literary analyses, and we're going to kind of finish up cause and effect and transition into compare and contrast with this discussion forum. So just watch the video. There are 4 parts of a literary analysis, which the video talks about, and I want to know what those are. The video expects you to write the introduction from at what point in your paper, and why is that? And the video explains it. And then finally, what can we learn from this video about literary analyses, and how can we apply them to our writing of our cause and effect papers, and by extension, our compare and contrast papers to come. So this week's discussion forum is a little bit of a reflection, but it's also delving into introductions and when we analyze texts and why that's important. So it's not a long video, should be fun watch, but that is our discussion forum for this week. Looking at our assignments, let's look at the grammar review number 4. So the grammar review number 4 is right here. Go ahead and pull it up so you all can see it. And it's getting there. It's taking it a second to load. But so far everybody's been doing really good on the grammar review, so I am happy about that. Okay, so the grammar review is on page 448 to 450 in our textbook. In the first activity, we're looking at semicolons this week. And if you don't recall semicolons from grammar class in high school, basically you have 2 types of punctuation that indicate when a conjunction is about to happen or when a sentence is being merged. So instead of putting a period, sometimes people will combine sentences using a comma and a conjunction. But when you don't want to use, I just used a conjunction, but when you don't want to use a conjunction, oftentimes stylistically, writers will choose to use a semicolon instead. So I'll just give you guys an example sentence up here. So for example, and our book outlines this and gives you lots of examples of semicolon use, but I could have 2 sentences. I could say, the grades were due on Friday. I didn't have time to get them done. Story of my life. So I have 2 sentences here that are complete. I could replace that period with a comma and say, the grades were due on Friday, comma, but I didn't have time to get them done. I could do that. That makes perfect sense. However, you can also do this. You can also replace that conjunction and comma with a semicolon. And a semicolon takes the place of that word. So it just shortens it up. Authors will often use semicolons as a stylistic choice if they're trying to not use so many ands, but, or ors in their sentences. If they're trying to vary it up, make it look a little fresh, they'll choose that. And so you don't see a lot of semicolons. It's not something that we deal with a lot with writing, but I think it's a really helpful tool, especially if you're struggling with, you're like, man, I'm using the word and a lot. What do I do? How do I get variety? Then you can replace that and comma with a semicolon. So 1 through 5 in activity 6 is going to ask you to write the word before the semicolon in the sentence where it's needed, and then the word after. So for example, and this is not the answer, don't write this down, but if it was paged, this is what your answers are going to look like. It's going to be a word, the semicolon where it needs to happen, and then the word after it. Obviously, that's not the answer, but that's how your answer should be structured for this part. And then the same thing for number 7. Write a semicolon and then the transition from the list in the box for 1 through 5. And your book will show you what this looks like. And then finally, activity 8 is set up exactly the same as activity 6. So should be pretty easy, but I want to definitely make sure that you all know how to use semicolons if you choose to do so in your writing. And like I said, the textbook on pages 448 to 450 give a very detailed and thorough outline of semicolon use and some good examples. All right, so that's grammar review number 4. Like I said, everybody's been doing pretty good on the grammar reviews, so I'm not too worried about you all. And then the other one is textbook assignment number 3. Textbook assignment number 3, I'm going to pull it up and show you all, is a pretty straightforward from the book. It's going to look weird when you open up this file. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. It'll look strange. But on pages 55 to 57 in your textbook, for answers 1 through 15, you're going to have a set of 4 sentences like this. One of these sentences is the main point, the P. The other 3 sentences are the support, or the S's. I want to know, of these 4 sentences, what is the main idea, or the P, and what are the 3 other sentences that support that main idea? So we're going to backtrack a little bit. Back when you all did those passages, it was our first couple of textbook assignments. You did those passages where you had to write down the topic sentence and then the supporting details. This is a condensed review of that. So I just want to know, what is the main point here and what are the support? And read carefully. As you can tell, some of these sentences start exactly the same. So it's up to you, especially number 2 here, it's up to you to figure out, okay, which sentence is the overarching idea and which sentences just kind of ride the coattails of that and support that idea. So it shouldn't be a hard assignment if you just read and look carefully at the sentences. But that's 1 through 15. And then in part 2 here, 1 through 5, I just want you to put an X by which passage in the textbook lacks supporting details. So if you look at pages 58 and 59, you're going to see a passage and then 2 sets of sentences. And one set has a lot of details, the other one does not. And I want to know which one does not have enough details to really stand on its own. Which one needs more information. Okay, so that's textbook assignment number 3. So those assignments are what's due. The discussion forum post obviously is due Friday, and then your responses to the discussion forum and the grammar and textbook activity are all due Sunday, Sunday the 23rd. Now, before I finish this video, I do want to quickly show you where compare and contrast. That's our next paper. I love compare and contrast because I think it's not only it's a pretty easy paper in my opinion to write, but it's honestly a lot of fun. Now I will show you in resources here. Under week 6, there is this revising handout. The revising handout shows you when all of our revisions are due. So it gives you some information about how to revise if you're not familiar. So let me backtrack from that. And this also tells you right here when everything is due. So cause and effect. Revisions are due Sunday of week 7. So next Sunday is when revisions on paper 1 is due if you're choosing to revise it. Again, it's totally optional. You don't have to revise it if you don't want to. If you got an A or a B, you're probably fine. That's totally up to you. And then compare and contrast will be due Sunday of week 11. You do get an extra week because of spring break for revising that paper. And then our third paper, narration, the revisions are going to be due the Sunday of week 15. You'll notice on here our last paper in the class we don't get to revise because it's due the week of finals. So you don't really have time to turn it in and then turn back around and revise it. But we will be doing a bit of workshopping on that last paper. So hopefully that will help make sure that your final draft is as great as it can be. And I will talk more about that when we get closer to our last paper. But in week 7, there is an example compare and contrast. Our guidelines for week 7 are really in the writing prep Dropbox, which I'm going to go over next week. But I want to go ahead and show you an example compare and contrast so you can see. And Miss Dush actually in our library wrote this, so it's kind of fun. She basically writes about the television show and the novel series, and she compares and contrasts how the TV and the novel in this case are similar and different. And you can kind of see her explain that. Now her paper is really short. For this 105, 109 class is a short draft. It's only a page and a half. I obviously want your papers to be 3 pages long, but she kind of gives the bare bones here to start out the paper. But the idea behind compare and contrast is that you are taking 2 topics that are similar and different. So you want to pick 2 topics that have enough similarities that you can kind of make connections and show how they're the same, but you also want to pick 2 topics that are different enough that give you something to write about. So some examples of some good compare and contrast papers that students have written in the past. I had a really good one that was about union jobs versus non-union jobs. Like they worked at Kroger and then they worked at another job that I can't remember. This was years ago, if Kroger was union or non-union. If it was, then the other one wasn't. So they just talked about the similarities and differences with those jobs and how they impacted them, which was a really cool paper because they could tie together the 2 topics, show how they were the same, how they were different, and then also show how it affected them, which I thought was really neat. I've had people write papers about the differences between college and high school. That's a pretty popular one. Between living in the city and living in the country, if you've lived multiple places, about traveling overseas or going to Europe versus traveling to the beach. I mean, you can pick and choose. You'll notice that the topics I've given, there's a little bit of similarity, but there's a lot of differences you can kind of pick out and describe. But we'll talk more about this next week with the writing prep in week 7. But since our papers have a bit of a fast turnaround, I want you to go ahead and be thinking about topics for compare and contrast that interest you. Things that you could compare and talk about their similarities, their differences, and bring that to the table next week when we go over the writing prep. So that's week 6 for English 109. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to call me, email me. If I'm in my office, stop by. But if not, let me know your questions and I'll be happy to answer them. So that's all for this week. I will talk to you all later. And in the meantime, have a great week and I'll see you soon. Bye.